Hi guys, here's a video that goes over the multiple choice review packet for your fall final. Hopefully this can help you get prepared to take that test. So number 1, it says tell whether the sequence is arithmetic or geometric. If it's arithmetic, state the common difference. If it's geometric, state the common ratio. So arithmetic is when you are adding, and then geometric is when you are multiplying. So the first thing you need to do is you need to figure out what's happening from term to term. So you're going from 4 to 20, 20 to 100, and then 100 to 500. You're not adding, so in this case you're multiplying by 5 every single time. So since you are multiplying, it is geometric, and you're multiplying by 5, so your common ratio is 5. So correct answer for that is D. For number 2, it says find the 30th term of the sequence. So again, it does not specify what type of sequence it is, but check to see what the pattern is. So you're starting from -10 to -3, -3 to 4, 4 to 11, 11 to 8. So what's happening with this is you are adding 7 every single time. Now since you're adding 7, it is an arithmetic sequence. So you have an explicit formula for the arithmetic sequence. It is AN equals A1 plus n minus 1 times D. So we're trying to find the 30th term, which means 30 is n, because n always corresponds to the term number. So I'm trying to find the 30th term. I know my first term is 10, -10, plus 30 minus 1 times your common difference, which is 7, since you're adding 7 every single time. I'm going to take that whole thing and plug it into my calculator. So 30 minus 1 times 7, and that gives you 193. So your correct answer for that is D. For number 3, write the recursive rule for the sequence. So a recursive rule always uses the previous terms to find new terms. So in this case, right here, if you notice with the formula, it says minus 3n. Minus 3 means that you are using an arithmetic sequence. And then since it's minus 3n, that means -3 is your common difference. So D in this case is -3. So you can go ahead and eliminate B and D as possible answers because those say +8 and +8. And in fact, we're supposed to be subtracting 3. Now to figure out your first term, for your first term, n is 1. So A1 is going to be 8 minus 3, and I'm going to plug in 1 for n. So that gives you 5. So your first term is 5, so then your recursive formula is going to be letter C. Number 4 is going backwards from what we did with number 3. So you have the recursive, and now we're doing the explicit. So this is arithmetic once again because you are adding. So your explicit formula for arithmetic is AN equals A1 plus n minus 1 times D. We know the first term is given to us, that is the 2, so I can replace the 2. And then what you're adding every single time, this +8 is your common difference. So I can distribute the 8 to simplify this formula, so I have 2 plus 8n minus 8. And then I can combine your like terms, so you can combine the 2 and the -8, and that gives you -6 plus 8n. So your formula is D. Number 5, write an explicit rule for the sequence A1 equals 3 and AN equals -4 times AN minus 1. So in this case you are multiplying. So since you're multiplying, you're using a geometric explicit formula. So your geometric explicit formula is AN equals A1 times R to the n minus 1. So A1 is given to you, that's 3. Your common ratio is what you are multiplying by every single time, and that is that -4. So this is your explicit formula. So that is letter A. So if you notice with these answer choices, they're just mixing up the 3 and the -4, so just be careful with that and pay attention to it while you're taking your final. For number 6, write the explicit rule for the nth term of the geometric sequence. So again, it's the same thing that you did for number 5, it's just worded a little differently. So I have an equals my first term, which is 5, times my common ratio to the n minus 1. So that is letter B. Find the sum for the first 65 terms of the sequence. So it does not specify if it's arithmetic or geometric, so we can go ahead and figure that out. So -7 to -2 to 3 to 8, you are adding 5 every single time, so it is an arithmetic sequence. So you're finding the sum, so you have a formula for the sum of the arithmetic sequence. That's Sn equals n over 2 times a1 plus an. We know n is 65 since there's 65 terms that you're trying to add. We know the first term, which is -7, but we do not know an. Okay, we're not given that information yet. So what we can do is we can use the explicit formula for an arithmetic sequence. So that was this, to find that 65th term. So I have my first term is -7, n is 65 since we have 65 terms, times your common ratio, which is 5. You can take that whole thing and plug it into the calculator, and that gives you 313. So that means this last term is 313. So now we can actually evaluate the sum. So I have 65 over 2 times -7 plus 313, and that gives you 9,945. So your answer for that is A. For number 8, you get paid 5 cents a day for work. You get paid 3 times as much as the previous day. How much will you make on the 15th day? So your A1 is your first day, which is 0.05, so 5 cents. It's 3 times as much, which means your common ratio is 3. So we want to know how much you'll make on the 15th day, which means n is 15, since you're looking for the 15th term. So I have my formula for the geometric explicit, since this is geometric. My first term is 0.05. My common ratio is 3, and that's 15 minus 1 at the top. I'm going to take that and plug it in. 0.05 times 3 to the 14th. And that gives you $239,148.45. So your answer for that is D. Be careful with this one, because if you notice, A and D look very similar to each other. It's just that the decimal is off, so pay attention to your answer choices. Nine, given the recursive formula, list the first 6 terms of the sequence given A1 equals 3. So we already have our first term, which is 3. We want to find the first 6, so we need to find A2, A3, A4, A5, and A6. So my second term, you're going to use the recursive formula, and this is saying taking -2 times an minus 1. An minus 1 means a previous term. So if I'm trying to find the second term, I'm taking -2 times the first term, which is -6. If I'm trying to find the third term, I'm taking -2 times the second term, which is going to leave you with a +12. So far we have 3, -6, +12. The only answer that would work with that is letter C. So you don't necessarily need to find 4, 5, and 6, but I'm going to go ahead and just fill in the boxes. So that's -24 because you're multiplying by -2, multiply by -2, and multiply by -2. That gives you -96. And number 10, the jellyfish population has been increasing according to the table below. What would the projected population be in the year 2030? So your table starts at 2010 and you're going to 2030. So this right here is A1. Now if we were to continue the table and go all the way up to 2030, that term is actually A21. Let me rewrite that because it looks bad. Okay, so you're going from 2010 to 2030. If you count it out, you are actually looking for your 21st term. So we have the first term, which is 5,000. We're trying to find the 21st term, and we need to pay attention to what's happening with the table. So from 5,000 to 10,000 to 20,000, you're multiplying by 2, which makes it a geometric sequence. So I have my formula for the geometric, and we're trying to find the 21st term. My first term is 5,000. My common ratio is 2. And then n was 21, so it's 21 minus 1. And then we can go ahead and evaluate that out. So that's 5,000 times 2 to the 20th power. And that gives us this large number. For number 11, you are taking half of this middle term and squaring it, and that's what C is going to be. So I have negative 10 divided by 2, which is negative 5, and squaring it, so that gives you a positive 25. Number 12, I would just do this on the calculator. So I'm going to take the square root of negative 40 and get a decimal. That is 6.32. Make sure you look all the way across the calculator and it has an I with it. So if you look at your answer choices, it can't be D because it wasn't negative. It also can't be B because that doesn't have an I with it. So, and it can't be 20I because 20I is not 6.32I, so your answer has to be A. But double check that. So I'm going to take 2I and the square root of 10, put that into my calculator, and that also gives me 6.32I. So your answer for that has to be letter A. $13, I'm also just going to plug right into the calculator. So I have 2 plus 7I times 4 minus 2I, and that gives you 22 plus 24I. If you wanted to do it yourself, you can just go ahead and FOIL and then combine your like terms. Don't forget that I squared is negative 1. 14 is also a good calculator one. So the square root of negative 5 times the square root of negative 9. That gives me negative 6.71. Scanning all the way across, there is no I. Your answer has to be negative. So you can eliminate A and C. Also can't be D because it didn't have an I. So your answer has to be B. But again, double check that. So I have negative 3 square root of 5. That as a decimal is the same thing, negative 6.71. Write an equation for the parabola in the form y equals ax minus h squared plus k that has the vertex 3, 2 and passes through the point 4, 6. So your vertex is hk, and the point that it passes through, that is your x and y. So you're going to replace those 4 numbers in this formula over here. So my y was 6. We don't know what a is. That's actually what we're solving for. Your x is 4 minus h, which is 3, squared plus k, which is 2. Simplify what you have. So you need to simplify this first. So 4 minus 3 is 1. 1 squared is 1. So you end up with 1a plus 2. Subtract 2 from both sides and you get a equals 4. So your formula is y equals 4 x minus h, quantity squared, plus k, which was 2. So your answer for this is D. 16, evaluate the discriminant. So your formula for the discriminant is b squared minus 4ac. This needs to be equal to 0, so you can subtract 13 from both sides. So that's 2x squared minus 6x minus 13 equals 0. This is A, B, and C. So when I'm calculating that discriminant, I have negative 6 squared minus 4 times A, which is 2, times C, which is negative 13. I'm going to take that and plug it into the calculator and make sure you use the parentheses, otherwise the calculator is going to give you the wrong answer. And that gives you positive 140. So since it's positive, it's obviously not negative or 0, so you need to pick between A and C. So positive 2 real rationals means that you have a perfect square. Positive 2 real irrationals means that your number was not a perfect square. 140 is not a perfect square, so your answer for that has to be C. Um, 17 is factorable, and you can tell that it's factorable because your answer choices are nice numbers. So you're looking for two numbers that multiply to negative 10 and add to 3. So I have x, that's going to be positive 5 and negative 2. When you're solving by factoring, you're setting each factor equal to 0. So you get x equals negative 5 and x equals 2. So your answer for that is C. 18 is also factorable. So it needs to be equal to 0. So I have 3x squared plus x minus 4 equals 0. A lot of the times people have a hard time factoring this because you do have that leading coefficient of a 3. So instead of factoring this, I'm actually going to use the quadratic formula just to give you a different method to use. So your quadratic formula is x equals negative b plus or minus the square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So b in this case is 1, so I have negative 1 plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2 times a. So that gives me negative 1 plus or minus the square root. So I have 1 squared minus 4 times 3 times negative 4, which gives me 49 over 6. Square root of 49 is 7. So negative 1 plus or minus 7 over 6. Now to get your two answers, we need to separate. So I have negative 1 plus 7 divided by 6, and negative 1 minus 7 divided by 6. So negative 1 plus 7 is 6 over 6, which is 1. Negative 1 minus 7 is negative 8 over 6, which can be reduced. Divide them both by 2, and that gives you negative 4/3. So you have positive 1 and negative 4/3. Correct answer for that is B. 19, if you look at your answer choices, you do have complex solutions, which means it's not factorable, so use the quadratic formula once again. So negative b, so that's a positive 2 plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2 times a. So I have 2 plus or minus the square root negative 2 squared minus 4 times 1 times 9, which gives us negative 32 over 2. Negative 32, square root of negative 32 can be simplified further. I'm going to do that on the side over here. 32 is the same thing as 16 and 2. 16 is 4 and 4, so I have my pair of 4s that I can take out. Now since it is negative, when you take it out, it's 4i root 2. So I can go ahead and rewrite this as 2 plus or minus 4i root 2 over 2. Now both of these are divisible by 2, so 2 divided by 2 is 1. 4i root 2 divided by 2 is 2i root 2. And that's the answer that you're looking for. So positive 1 plus or minus 2I root 2 is letter D. For number 20, the 3 in the front represents a vertical stretch, so all of your answer choices already have that, so that's not really helpful. The plus 6 on the outside means you are moving 6 units up, so you can eliminate C and D. The number on the inside of the parentheses, you are adding 2, so you would think that it's 2 units to the right, but it's actually 2 units to the left, because it's the opposite of what you would think with that number in the parenthesis. So your answer for that is B. Um, 21, find the x-coordinates of the intersection of this parabola. So the intersection, you can use a graphing calculator if you want to. So what you would do is you would graph both of those, find the intersection on the calculator by using the trace option. Or if you want to do it by hand, the intersection means you're setting these two equal to each other. So I have x squared minus 10 equals 5x plus 4. It is a quadratic, so you need to solve by factoring. So move these two numbers to the other side. So I have x squared minus 5x minus 14 equals 0, because you would subtract 4 from both sides. Factor, so you get x minus 7 and x plus 2 equals 0. So you get x equals positive 7 and negative 2. So your answer for that is C. (22), you can divide this using either synthetic division or long division. I'm actually going to do synthetic division because I think it's faster. So synthetic division has that little box. Now in that box you're always taking the opposite of what you're dividing by, so that's a negative 4. Those are your coefficients, so that's 3x cubed minus 11x squared plus 5x minus 8. Leave some space. This is your remainder box, by the way. First term comes straight down, so that's 3. Take what's down here and multiply by what's in the box, so that gives you negative 12. Combine, so that's negative 23. So if you start to look at your answer choices, you have 3 and negative 23, which means you can eliminate B, because that doesn't have the negative 23 over here. Also, you can eliminate C and D, actually, because since your polynomial started with an x cubed, that means your answer has to start with an x squared, since you're dividing it. So your answer has to be A, but we can go ahead and continue. So I have negative 23 times negative 4 is positive 92. Combine, that gives you 97. Multiply, that gives you negative 388. Combine, and you get negative 396 as your remainder. And your remainder always gets added on the end over what you divided by, so your answer is still A anyway. 23, you're dividing once again, so I'll go ahead and divide using synthetic division. That is my method of choice. So take the opposite of that, so that's a 3. I have 2x to the 4th minus 3x cubed minus 6x squared minus 8 minus 3. Leave some space, remainder box. First term comes straight down, so that's 2. 2 times 3 is 6. Combine, so that gives you 3. 3 times 3 is 9. Combine gives you 3. 3 times 3 is 9. Combine, that gives you 1. 1 times 3 is 3, and this one doesn't end up with a remainder. So we started with an x to the 4th, which means this is an x cubed. So this is 2x cubed plus 3x squared plus 3x plus 1.
Kari Aubrey, you're right in the back parking lot. Kari Aubrey, you're right in the back parking lot.
It's a lovely little announcement. So your answer for that is A. 24, you have the factor and you want to find the other factor, so that's another type of division problem. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Take the opposite, so that's a negative 4. List out my coefficients, so I have 1x cubed, 5x squared, minus 16x, minus 80, leaving some space. Now since I'm giving you the factor, that means your remainder should be 0. So as you work through this, you should get 0 for the remainder. If you don't, then you need to double check your work. So 1 times negative 4 is negative 4, combine, multiply, combine, that gives you negative 20. Negative 20 times negative 4 is positive 80, and you get the remainder of 0. So this is your quadratic that you need to factor because it says find the other factors. So that's x squared plus x minus 20. Two numbers that multiply to negative 20 and add to 1 are positive 5 and negative 4. So your answer for that is B. (25), write it as a product of linear factors. That means you're factoring. So 4 terms mean you factor by grouping. So out of your first group, I can take out an x squared. That leaves me with x minus 3. Out of that second group, I can take out a negative 4 because this term is negative. So negative 4 times x plus 3. Now these two should always be the same. Oh, made a mistake. That should be x minus 3. They're supposed to be the same, so if they're not the same, that means you made a mistake like I did. Continue to factor, so I have x squared minus 4 and x minus 3. This can be factored further. That is x plus 2 and x minus 2 times x minus 3. So your answer for that is B. And then 26, this is a difference of squares, so I can factor this as x squared minus 16, because 16 squared is 256, and x squared plus 16. Now this is still factorable. That is x plus 4 and x minus 4. So you always want to check to see if you can factor further if you can. So then your answer for that is C. If you notice, this right here is letter A, so you have to be careful with that because that's not factored completely, and it says factor completely. 27, find the zeros. So you're finding the zeros, so you set each factor equal to 0. 9 does not count as a factor. Well, it counts as a factor, but you wouldn't use it to find the zero since there is no variable with it. So I have 2x plus 9 equals 0, x plus 4 equals 0, and x minus 2 equals 0. So for this one, subtract 9. You get 2x equals negative 9, divide by 2. So you get x equals negative 9 halves. And then subtract 4 from both sides. You get x equals negative 4. Add 2 to both sides, and you get x equals 2. So I have 2, negative 4, and negative 9 halves. 2, negative 4, negative 9 halves. Correct answer for that is C. 28, write the equation of this cubic function. So all of these functions are in factored form. So look for your zeros. You have a 0 right here at negative 5. So you have one at negative 5, you have one at positive 2, and you have one at 7. So if I have a 0 at negative 5, then that means its factor is x plus 5. If I have a 0 at 2, that means the factor is x minus 2. And if I have a 0 at 7, that means the factor is x minus 7. So looking at these factors, the only one that has all 3 of these factors is letter C. So your answer for that has to be C. Now, if for some reason it's not in factored form, what you can do is you can take all of these answer choices and graph them into the calculator and see which graph looks like this. And the only graph that'll work will end up being letter C. Finding all the possible rational roots, that is the plus or minus P over Q. P represents the factors of your last term. Q represents factors of your first term. So factors of your last term was 10, so factors of 10 are 10, 5, 2, and 1. Factors of Q are 5 and 1. So you're taking all of your P's and dividing them by all of your Q's. So you have plus or minus 10 over 5, which is 2, plus or minus 10 over 1, plus or minus 5 over 5, plus or minus 5 over 1. This is starting to look like a mess, but that's okay. Plus or minus 2 over 5, plus or minus 2 over 1, which we already have over here, and then plus or minus 1 over 5, and plus or minus 1. So your correct answer for that is letter C. Number 30 is the average rate of change problem over the interval. So you have this function. The interval represents your x's, so this is x1 and x2. I'm going to take both of those and plug them in. So I'm taking s of 0, so taking 0 and plugging it in, so I have 3 times 0 squared plus 0 plus 2. That's going to equal 2. So that's going to create your first point. So your first point is 0, since your x was 0, and then the y-coordinate is 2. For your second point, I'm taking 7 and plugging it in. So that's 3 times 7 squared plus 7 plus 2. So 3 times 7 squared plus 7 plus 2 is 156. And that represents your second term. So our x was 7 and the y was 156. Now average rate of change is just finding the slope between those 2 points. So your formula for slope that you did in 1-2, Algebra 1-2, is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So your y2 is 156 minus your y1, which is 2, over your x2 minus your x1. So that gives you 154 over 7, which is 22. So your answer for that is C. The graph of an odd degree with a negative leading coefficient. So when you think odd, I want you to think op. So odd means that the directions, your arrows are going in opposite directions, which means you can eliminate A and B. Now since it's negative, that means it has to be going down as it goes to the right. So your answer for that has to be D. If it was even, your arrows would be going in the same direction. So A and B represent even polynomials. For 32, since we're adding and subtracting a rational fraction, we need a common denominator. So I'm going to go ahead and start by factoring this denominator. So two numbers that multiply to -8 and add to -2 are -4 and +2. Now you're comparing your denominator. So your second denominator is missing the x plus 2. So I'm going to go ahead and multiply the second fraction by the x plus 2. Okay, I'm going to rewrite it. So I have 9x minus 6 times x plus 2 over my common denominator, which is x minus 4 times x plus 2. That minus 6 I need to distribute. Please make sure that you distribute the -6 into the parenthesis, not the +6. So I have 9x minus 6x minus 12 over x minus 4 x plus 2. Combine your like terms, so 9x minus 6x is 3x minus 12 over the common denominator, which I'm getting too lazy to rewrite. Always check to see if it can be reduced. So the 3x minus 12, they both have a 3 in common, so I can factor out a 3. That leaves me with x minus 4 over the common denominator, which I'll actually rewrite since something's going to cancel. You can always cancel out whatever's the same on top that's the same on the bottom, which is the x minus 4s. So your final answer is 3 over x plus 2, which is letter D. Now with multiplying and dividing, you do not need a common denominator, so I'm going to go ahead and factor everything. So x squared minus 81 is x plus 9 and x minus 9. X squared minus 36 is x plus 6 and x minus 6. Now since you are dividing, that means you need to flip over the second fraction. You only have to flip over the second one, and then it becomes a multiplication problem. So this is x plus 6 over x minus 9. With multiplication and division, you can get cancel happy, so cancel whatever's the same on top, that's the same on the bottom, and whatever you are left over with is your answer. So the x plus 9 over x minus 6 is letter B. Um, 34, again, you are subtracting, so you need a common denominator, but that's already set up for you. The big thing with this one is that minus in between. You have to make sure that you distribute it into that second fraction. That's how this problem is designed to trip you up. So I have 9x minus 18 minus negative 7x, so that becomes plus 7x, minus 4, because you're distributing the minus completely, over 2. So 9x plus 7x is 16x. Negative 18 minus 4 is negative 22 over 2. Now both of those are divisible by 2, so you can divide, so that gives you 8x minus 11, which is letter B. And then 35 is another multiplication problem, so we can factor everything. So out of your first numerator, you can take out a 4. That leaves you with a plus 2 over a squared minus 25 is a plus 5 and a minus 5 times a minus 5 can't be factored. Out of the second denominator, I can take out a 5, so that's 5 times a plus 2. Get cancel happy. So cancel, cancel. I can also cancel out my a minus 5s. So that leaves me with 4 over 5 times a plus 5. If you look at your answer choices, you do not have anything that looks exactly like that. But if we distribute the 5 down here, that gives us 5a plus 25, which is letter A. Um, 36 is a good one to test out your answer choices with the calculator. So for instance, you take each of your answer choices and plug them in for x. So take root 3, plug it in for x, take negative root 3, plug it in for x, and see if it equals 1. Same thing with all of your other answer choices. So take 9, plug it in for x, negative 9, plug it in for x, see if it equals 1. I think that would actually be faster than solving it by hand, but I'll go ahead and solve by hand. You need a common denominator. So your common denominator needs to be able to cancel out all of your denominators, so it needs to have the x minus 9 and the x minus 1. So you're going to multiply each fraction by that common denominator. I'm just rewriting it. So I'm going to multiply everything by x minus 9 and x minus 1, x minus 9 and x minus 1, and then over here, x minus 9, x minus 1. For my first fraction, my x minus 9's cancel, so I am left with x times x minus 1, plus second fraction, my x minus 1's cancel, So I'm left with x times x minus 9 equals these two. You need to actually multiply out. You can FOIL it out. You're going to end up with x squared minus 10x plus 9. I can distribute what I have over here, so that's x squared minus x plus x squared minus 9x equals x squared minus 10x plus 9. Do you see how long this is getting? That's why it's easier to just plug in your answers for x. But I will keep going. That gives me 2x squared minus 10x equals x squared minus 10x plus 9. Since you do have a quadratic, you want to get it equal to 0, so I'm going to subtract x squared from both sides. I'm going to add 10x to both sides, and I'm also going to move that 9 over. I'm going to rewrite it over here. So 2x squared minus x squared is x squared. My 10x's are going to cancel, and then so I have x squared minus 9 equals 0. I can continue to solve, so add 9 to both sides. That gives you x squared equals 9, square root, so you get x equals plus or minus 3. So the correct answer for this is C, which if you test out your answer choices, should end up working so that it equals 1. Restrictions on the domain. So restrictions on the domain happen when your denominator equals 0 because you can never divide by 0. So I'm going to go ahead and factor that denominator. So that gives me x plus 5 and x minus 5. You don't necessarily have to factor the numerator since you're looking at the restrictions on the domain and that comes from the denominator. But I'm going to go ahead and factor it anyway. Whoops. You can hear my baby crying. Oh boy. So you don't cancel things out. Instead, you're just looking at that denominator to see when it equals 0. So you have x plus 5 equals 0 and x minus 5 equals 0. So you get x equals negative 5 and x equals 5. So your two restrictions are positive 5 and negative 5. Be careful with canceling things out. My recording just stopped, so I don't remember exactly where I left off talking, but what I was trying to say was be careful when you start canceling things out, because this right here, even though it cancels, still creates a restriction on the domain, so you don't necessarily want to cancel anything out when you're looking at just the restrictions. If this was asking for any wholes or asymptotes, then you would start to cancel things out, but since it's just the restrictions, don't cancel anything out. 38 is a good calculator question. You're taking the cube root of 343 over negative 64. So, in the calculator, cube root of 343 divided by negative 64 is negative 1.75, which I can change to a fraction, gives you negative 7/4. So your answer for that is D. If you are using a TI-84 to get to the cube root, you hit Math, and then it's option number 4. Looks like this. That's the one that you're going to pick. 39 is also a good calculator question, so 27 to the 4/3 gives you 81. So I might as well use a calculator if you can. Number 40, you always want to isolate your radical. You do that with 41 as well. I like to box my radicals. That way I know what I'm trying to isolate. So for this one I can start by subtracting 14 from both sides. That gives me the cube root of x minus 9 equals 6. From here you want to cube both sides. That gives me x minus 9 equals 6 to the 3rd is 216. Add 9 to both sides, and you get x equals 225. Now with radicals, you should always check your answer, which means you should take that 225 and plug it back in for x and see if it equals 20 when you take the entire expression and plug it in, which indeed it is. So then your answer is going to be that 225. 41, when I isolate my radical, I subtract 7 from both sides. That gives me the square root of x plus 5 equals negative 5. This right here automatically has no solution because you'll never be able to take the square root of a number and have it be negative. But let's say you forget that. You can go ahead and square both sides. That gives you x plus 5 equals 25. Subtract 5 from both sides and you get x equals 20. Now if you notice, that is an answer choice, but since you are dealing with radicals, you always want to check it. So if I take 20 and plug it in, I have the square root of 20 plus 5 plus 7. That equals the square root of 25 plus 7, which is 5 plus 7, which definitely does not equal negative 2, which is what you were looking for. Or sorry, positive 2, which is what you're looking for since the original problem equals positive 2. 42, I'm actually going to just do in the calculator, so I'm going to get a decimal approximation. So I'm going to take the square root of 32 plus the square root of 18 minus 2 square root of 3 plus the square root of 27. That gives me 11.63. Now I'm going to take all of my answer choices and see what those equal as decimals as well. So the square root of 77 minus 2 root 3, that gives you 5.31. 5 minus the square root of 3 is 3.27. 7 square root of 5 is 15.65. And 7 root 2 plus root 3 is 11.63, which matches the original problem, so your correct answer for that is D. For 43, when you're dealing with radicals and rationals, you want to have them all in the same format. So what you want to do is you want to change this so that it is a rational exponent. So your exponent on your x right now is a 1. To create it as a rational exponent, it's the power over the root. So that's x to the 1/3, since your power is 1 and the root is 3, times x to the 3/4. Now since you're multiplying your bases, what you want to do is you want to add your exponents. So those two you are going to add together. So that gives you 1/3 plus 3/4, which gives you 13/12, which is letter D. And then 44, given the graph of the radical function, write the equation and state the domain. So if you look at your graph over here, you need to find your starting point. Your starting point is at this point right here, and that's at 3, 0. So what's happening is your graph is starting at 3, 0 and heading to the right. So since it is going to the right, all of these values for x are greater than or equal to 3, which means you can eliminate C and D as answer choices since that's saying x is less than 3. And then for this one, your parent function for the radical starts at 0, 0. And what happened was we took that and we moved it over 3 units to the right. So 3 units to the right means it's going to be x minus 3 underneath that radical. So minus 3 underneath the radical means you're moving 3 to the right. Plus 3 means you're moving 3 to the left. So this one is to the left. It's the opposite of what you would think it would be. 45, which is the last question. Cornelius can clean the entire house in 4 hours. William can clean the house in 3 hours. How long will it take them to clean the house if they work together? So the way that you set this up is you have the time on the top for them to work together over Cornelius's time, plus the time together over William's time, and that equals 1 since they're cleaning the one house together. You need a common denominator, which in this case is 12. So I'm going to multiply everything by that common denominator. So 12 over 4 is going to reduce to 3t, plus 12 over 3 reduces to 4t, equals 12. That gives me 7t equals 12. Divide by 7. And 12 divided by 7 is 1.7. So that's 1.7 hours. So the correct answer for that is C. Alright, so that covers the entire multiple choice review. I hope that helps you get prepared for the final.